Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's March 5, 2018, and this is episode 610. Although I've just completed my second Japan Winter Wildlife Tour and final winter tour for this season, today we're going to pick up the trail on the first of the two winter wildlife tours as we leave the cranes in the snow behind and move on to our final day with the whooper swans before heading over to Dowsu for sea eagles and foxes, etc. Once again fighting the clock as usual, I still had 109 photos left in my collection of images that I still wanted to talk about in this Travelogue series. I was hoping to complete this series with one more episode, but having gone through and shortlisted the images that I really want to talk about, I still have 27 images left. We'll jump into it and see if I can whittle down my selection to just 10 images as we go. On the 8th shooting day of the tour and the 5th day in Hokkaido, we went back to the Kushiro Lake for one last whooper swan fly-in shoot before starting our drive over to Dowsu and the Notsuke Peninsula. One of the reasons I ensure that we get at least 2 days in each location is because quite often the weather can change and present us with different opportunities. On this visit, it was overcast and slightly misty, conditions that I love to photograph the whooper swans in, and you can hopefully see why in this first image for today. I really like it when we get white swans on a white background, often with just subtle differences in tone between the two. The thing that I really like about this photo is that the swan on the left of the frame is looking straight at me as he flew in. It has to feel a bit strange to them when they fly to their beach and see a line of photographers awaiting their arrival. They're used to seeing people, of course, but this is a reminder that they are not totally oblivious to our presence. My settings for this image were a 500th of a second shutter speed at f11, ISO 1000 and a focal length of 400mm with my 100 to 400mm lens. This is, of course, the Mark II version of this lens. Again, this year we had a participant that had rented the original version without knowing and was somewhat disappointed. If you're buying this lens and you find what you think is a good deal, check that it is not the original lens, which is very long in the tooth now. And frankly, with today's camera resolution really punishing older lenses, I wouldn't use one even if it was free, let alone cheap. Although I love it when the white swans are on a white background, I also found this next photograph somewhat appealing, with two juvenile whooper swans still with their wings spread as they landed in the fresh snow on the frozen Kushiro Lake. I've entitled this Grey But Not Ugly, and then with ducklings in parentheses. Sometimes the grey juvenile swans might look a bit like ugly ducklings, as in the fairy tale, but in this photo I think it helps to accentuate them against the white background. I toyed with the idea of removing the 3 lines of thawed snow at the top of the frame, but decided against it, as I think they add a little bit of depth to the background. My settings for this were f11 at ISO 1000 still, but I had increased my shutter speed now to a 640th of a second as the light gradually came up. My focal length was 286mm. I have another swan shot that I wanted to show you, but I'll skip that in a bid to still try to finish this Travelogue series today. I did post it to Instagram while I was traveling, so check out my Instagram account if you don't already follow me over there. There's a link to my Instagram account in the sidebar on all of the blog posts, but as I reference things like this, I usually make them links in the manuscript as well that you can find on the blog, and you can always get to them with the short link mbp.ac and then the number of the episode. So this one is mbp.ac/610. After the swans, we drove a short way and called at Sulphur Mountain or Eolzan for a quick session with the surreal fumaroles spewing out their sulfuric steam and painting themselves yellow in the process, as you can see in this image. This place always seems a little bit apocalyptic to me. This is one of the few times when I decided to keep the ridge of the mountains behind the fumaroles in the shot, partly because the wind was blowing the steam away at a more acute angle than usual, but also because I felt it helped to show the surroundings a little better, providing a little more information about the place. My settings were a 250th of a second shutter speed at f14 with ISO 320 at 70mm. We then continued our journey towards Laosu, where we'd photographed the sea eagles, but on the way, took a diversion to the Nodske Peninsula in the hope of seeing some northern red fox, like the one that we see in this next image. This isn't my best fox photo, but I kind of like the way he's got the tip of his tongue sticking out as he scratches his face, looking quite content up on his snow bed, actually on the back of a trailer that is semi-abandoned on the peninsula. My settings for this were f11 with an 800th of a second shutter speed at ISO 1600 and a focal length of 560mm. I was using my 200 to 400mm lens with the built-in 1.4 times extender engaged. The following morning we went out for our first eagle shoot of the season from the fishing port of Laosu. Not long after we started shooting, the captain of the boat told me that there had been some orca spotted further down the coast and asked if we'd like to go. It took me about 0.2 seconds to decide that we must do just that, so we sped along the coast of the Shiratoko Peninsula. Although I'd love to have spent more time and got better photos, we still had a very special encounter, and I still got some shots like this one. We believe there were 7 orca in the pod we encountered. I've been travelling to Laosu and going out photographing the sea eagles in January and February every year since 2004, and I've never seen these amazing whales this early in the season. Wanting to get some really killer shots, pardon the pun, I've been trying to make time to visit in June or July for the past few years, but never seem to get time, especially now that I'm doing my Namibia tours at that time. This encounter has ratcheted up the priority of that trip a few rungs, so I might just have to do that this year. My settings for this image were f9 at 320mm and a shutter speed of 800th of a second with an ISO of 1250. Okay, so we're 5 images in, and I usually do 10 images per episode. Let's take a look at some eagle shots and see if we can finish this today and move on to the second wildlife trip next week. Rather than trying to show images from all 3 days that we photographed the eagles, let's just look at some of my favourites from this trip in chronological order. First, here's a white-tailed eagle catching one of the fish that we throw out from the boat. Quite often it's a flatfish, which you wouldn't normally expect an eagle to scoop from the surface of the sea, but still these can be quite dramatic shots. Unless these birds open their beaks when they're startled or angry, they have pretty expressionless faces, and in this image the sea eagle looks very calm and relaxed as he snatches up his breakfast. There was no sea ice on this first trip. It's getting less common, with us having no ice at all some years now. Although we did get some on the second tour, as we'll see in the coming weeks. My settings for this were a 1600th of a second shutter speed at f11 with ISO 640 and a focal length of 400mm. This image is not cropped at all. I love to go in very tight with my 100 to 400mm lens, and although the bird's wings sometimes go out of the frame, and I sometimes don't mind that, it's great when I get something like this in a 50 megapixel file without cropping. The detail is just amazing. This next image of a Stella's seagull grabbing his breakfast too is also not cropped. That's the framing that I shot the image at, and again, the 50 megapixel file absolutely blows me away. I love shooting wildlife like this with my Canon 5DSR, even if it's a slow frame rate camera that most wildlife photographers try to avoid. I have lots of shots with the entire splash in as well, but I just love getting in close and seeing all of this beautiful detail, and you lose some of that as you pull back to include more. My settings for this shot were f11 for a 1600th of a second exposure, at ISO 640, and again zoomed right in to 400mm. This final eagle shot is cropped down quite a way, to a file just over 22 megapixels, as the bird was quite a way off when he was doing these aerial acrobatics. That's another great thing about the high resolution we have now though, should we choose to use it. I can crop in quite a way and still have a bigger file than the 7D Mark II or even the 1DX Mark II. There are of course times when a higher frame rate would be useful, but I'm making it work at the slower frame rates, so I couldn't be happier. I'm in awe of these magnificent eagles. Just look at how he can fly pretty much upside down, yet his head is still pointing straight up, and his eye on his prey. These are absolutely incredible animals. My settings were still f11 with a shutter speed of a 1600th of a second at ISO 640 and a focal length of 400mm, although cropped as I mentioned. After our 3 days with the sea eagles, we headed around the base of the Shirotoko Peninsula to spend our final night in Utoro. On the way, we stopped for our traditional ICM or intentional camera movement session, which is always fun and generally provides us with some nice shots, as we can see here. For this kind of shot, I generally set my aperture to around f14 or f16 and set my shutter speed to a 25th of a second, and then adjust my exposure with the ISO. If it's too bright, I sometimes use a 3-stop neutral density filter, as I believe I had to do on this day, as it was bright sunlight. I then start with the camera pointing higher up in the trees, then move it downwards quickly, releasing the shutter as the snow starts to come into the bottom of the frame. I prefer it when the bottom of the frame is just white, but there were some sticks showing through on this day, leaving those smaller streaks. We continued on and photographed the Oshin-Koshin Falls and the sea ice, which was packed wall to wall on this side of the Shirotoko Peninsula. I did one 10-minute exposure of the sea ice to see if it was actually moving, and apart from a very thin line near the horizon, it was totally stationary. There wasn't even any vertical movement from the waves under the ice, which was surprising. We continued on into the town and took a walk down to the mouth of a river to see what we could do, and I was relatively happy with this last photo for today, which actually is the last image that we'll talk about from the first of this year's 2 Japan Winter Wildlife Tours. Here I believe I used a 3-stop ND filter for a 1.3 second exposure to smooth over the water in the river a little. I converted this to black and white, but the original was almost completely black and white anyway, with the dark stones in the river and the low light. My settings were f14 at ISO 100 with a focal length of 35mm. Before we finish, as usual, I've recorded a message from each member of the group that I'd like to play for you now. Okay, so here we are at the end of the first of the 2 Japan Winter Wildlife Tours for this year. We're on the bus, heading out after the last shoot on the final morning, and I'm going to walk around the bus and get a comment from each of the participants. So, let's start with Pete.
Hi, Pete Stegeman from Huntington, New York. We've had a fantastic time here in Japan, everywhere from snow monkeys in Nagano to the cranes and swans, and all of the eagles and such up in Hokkaido. It's been a fantastic experience. The country, the culture, the people have all been phenomenal. We've enjoyed it immensely. It's been a fantastic time.
Oh, thanks very much, Pete.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shelley Vandergriff from Dallas, Texas in the United States. And I hate to see this tour end. I have had a wonderful time. Wonderful people, wonderful opportunities, and great shots.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy? Would you like to say something?
I will. Hi, I'm Kathy Haltom from Dallas, Texas, United States of America. To me, the trip was very informative. I've always been scared to use manual settings, but I did learn how to do manual settings, and I feel very comfortable going forth with that process. And we met a whole bunch of fantastic people, including our tour guides.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Hello, I'm Paul Inskip from Sunderland in England. It's been a great trip. The scenery's been fantastic. Lovely hotels. It's a great trip for birders. Lots of eagles and cranes and monkeys. I think everyone likes monkeys. So, yep, it's definitely worthwhile coming. It's a great trip.
Okay, thanks a lot.
I'm Sandy Trevor from Sanibel, Florida. This trip has met all my expectations. I really wanted to see the cranes, and it was fantastic. And the sea eagles were, I didn't really know what to expect for that, but I mean, that was unbelievable. And yes, as has been said before, everybody loves monkeys, so it was great.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you, Sandy. Would you like to say a few?
Sure.
Here we go.
I'm Ellen Trevor from Sanibel, Florida, and this trip was wonderful. It's not only an introduction to Japanese wildlife, but culture as well, and I loved every bit of it. And Martin also helped me to move my photography up to another level, which I appreciated very much. Arigato.
Thank you.
Mark Lombardi from Harleysville, Pennsylvania. I really appreciated that we were able to be immersed in each subject for a couple of days, 2-3 days. You shoot one day, you look at the pictures, you shoot again, you talk, you ask questions, and the focus all the way through about manual exposure was really great. A surprise, and also loved all the cultural aspects. Excellent. Never been on a better trip.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi, Elise Spada from Haddon Heights, New Jersey. The wildlife was fabulous, but I really, really loved the snow and scenery in Hokkaido, and my photography skills are greatly improved thanks to Martin.
Thank you.
Nora Znotness, Kitchener, Canada. I think the snow cranes and the snow was the highlight. But for me, I finally learned how to use manual.
Brilliant.
Yay, team!
Good stuff. Ian?
Yeah, sure. Ian Brennan from Cork in Ireland. I really enjoyed the 2 weeks. I loved the photography. I loved the eagles, particularly, are my favourite ones. And I loved the experience of Japanese culture.
Excellent. Thank you very much. John, you want to say a few words?
Hi, I'm John Kimura from California, and this is my second trip with Martin on the Winter Wonderland wildlife trip, and it's just as great as the first time, and probably even better. I think the weather's a little bit better this time. Thank you.
So, all right, thank you. So, just with one last person, would you like to say a few words? Yukiko?
Hi.
No? Yeah?
Yes. I'm Yukiko Higuchi from Yokohama, and tour operator. I'm very happy. Everyone enjoyed the tour, and everyone are happy. And for me, I could watch the killer whale.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy, and I appreciate all of the guests and Martin-san and Oikawa-san. Thank you very much.
Your cold sounds like it's getting worse. Okay, so finally for Oikawa-san, let's have a round of applause for our amazing driver, and thanks everyone for coming. Thank you.
It's always lovely to hear what the participants have to say, and this was a great group, so listening brings back some nice memories of our time together. I do hope you've enjoyed following along with this Travelogue series. We'll continue next week with Tour 2, which presented a few different opportunities.
and possibly my best red fox shot to date, which we'll see in a few weeks. Our 2019 Snow Monkeys and Hokkaido tours have been sold out for a while now, but we are now taking bookings for 2020. So if you think you might like to join us, please take a look at our tour page at mbp.ac/ww2020. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and Google+, etc. and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, you take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.